Oops.
Good evening. I am Lisha Dore, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to One-on-One, where we bring to you some of the best minds in Trinidad and Tobago. Tonight, we will be discussing three issues that have captured the national conversation. And tonight, ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be a very, very interesting program. So these three issues are Joshua Seemungal'S resignation, race politics, and the Petrotrin workers' victory. We are honored to be joined tonight by veteran journalist, well-known media personality, Mr. Ken Ali. No stranger to our platform. He has been with us on several occasions, and we've always had some really, really interesting conversations. So tonight is going to be another one of those nights. I invite you all to stay tuned. You're not going to regret this. What I would like to propose, because we're really talking about three very separate issues tonight, is we spend maybe about 20 to 25 minutes on each topic, and that will include time for questions and comments from our audience. I know I've spoken to a few of you all who are joining us on social media as well as Zoom, and people are anxious to talk about these three issues. So 20 to 25 minutes per issue. We will take questions, we will take comments from the audience, and then we will move on to another issue. So joining me, as always, is my regular co-host, agripreneur, Dr. Donnie Rogers. I would like to extend a welcome to Donnie, as well as to you, all our viewers who are joining us on Zoom and social media, as well as members of the media who will be tuning in. We are absolutely thrilled to have you all with us tonight. As I say, week to week, we want to make this as interactive as possible. We really want to hear from you, and we can put you directly in touch with Mr. Ken Ali, who will address any questions or concerns you may have. So without further ado, I would like to pass the mic over now to my co-moderator, Dr. Donnie, who will give his opening remarks, and then we will kick off our discussion. Donnie, over to you.
Hi, good evening, Lisha, and good evening to our guest, the esteemed Mr. Ken Ali, and to our viewers. Thank you for tonight. Thank you for having me again. I think these three issues, as you said, Lisha, they are separate issues, but I think that they needed to be dealt with tonight, as all three kind of culminated over the last week. And I think it's a very opportune time to really have it discussed. I can see no better person qualified to discuss these issues than our guest tonight. And as usual in this program, we deal with topics with subject matter experts. And this is our position on that. You know, it's not an old talk. It's about getting down to the meat in the matter. And there is no better person to deal with this rather than our guest tonight. So, Mr. Ali, over to you.
Well, good evening to you, Donnie, and to Lisha, to the many viewers and listeners wherever they are. Thank you very much for having me again. Thank you. It means a lot. Lisha has been kind to invite me from time to time, and I'm grateful. Donnie, I've also been following what you've been doing in terms of your statements on agriculture and other policy issues, and I commend you for that. Hearty commendations on that.
Thank you.
So thanks for having me. I know we have a lot of serious discussions, but before we get to that, I hope you all have been watching some of the football. It is really high quality football, and I hope like me, you all have been having some fun looking at the games.
You know, I was in two minds about having the program because I know around now everybody only studying football.
Well, there's so many games.
I'm happy to see that we have several people online with us. That is absolutely great.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. It's been an outstanding World Cup competition, and I encourage people to view as many of the games. It's high-class sport. They call football a wonderful game, and it really is. But anyway, we're here to discuss some other matters. So, where do we begin?
I think we should start with Joshua Seemungal'S resignation. Now, Ken, I can give a background, or I don't know if you want to
No, feel free
All
to.
right. Okay, so You all may have been following what has developed with this particular story. It is one of the biggest stories in Trinidad and Tobago right now, and that would be the resignation of investigative journalist Joshua Seemungal from Guardian Media. Mr. Seemungal, he would have announced his resignation on June the 16th, saying that he was leaving because of ethical concerns and the integrity of investigative journalism. He said, and I quote, he made this decision to protect his ethical integrity, peace of mind, and moral compass. And I want to commend Joshua for that. I mean, he's a young journalist now starting off in his career, and for him taking such a stand, out of professional ethics, to me, that is highly commendable. Now, this issue of Mr. Seemungal's resignation, it would have gained a lot of traction, particularly when the Prime Minister responded to it. And the Prime Minister, she didn't mince her words. She described Guardian Media as an unethical puppet organization. She accused Guardian Media of smearing individuals and businesses, stoking racial tensions, and promoting special interests, right? I am quoting from a post she would have put out on the various social media platforms. So this resignation of Mr. Seemungal and the Prime Minister's response would have sparked a wider conversation about media ethics, editorial independence, public trust, the role of journalism. Even I myself commented on my social media platform and saying that I have the highest respect for journalists and the media in our democracy. They play a very, very important role. So I personally would like to see this issue rectified. We don't have many, we have two, in fact, two large media organizations in Trinidad and Tobago. It's just the Guardian and the Express, So if one, let us say, is having ethical concerns, where does that leave us? So Ken, I want to start with just asking you a couple of questions. How significant is Mr. Seemungal's resignation? And what does this tell us about the state of journalism in Trinidad and Tobago today? And of course, you being a veteran journalist, I mean, one of our very well-known journalists, there's nobody better to answer this question than you.
Thank you, Lisha.
If I just may interject, I'm sorry, Ken.
No,
remember,
sure.
after Mr. Seemungal's resignation, there was another journalist who came out and supported his position and spoke about right, yeah.
Yes, correct.
And spoke about how stories took precedence over the other, and during specific periods as well. So that too has some relevance in this conversation, and it shows a deeper issue into this resignation. I just wanted to actually mention that.
Well, okay. There's a lot here to say. There's a lot to unpack in this issue. I've written 2 articles so far on it. I may write more. I have a great interest in I have spent probably more time in newsrooms than any other practicing journalist at this time. I have spent a long time in various newsrooms, so I know the workings of newsrooms, and I know some of the backstories that take place. As one, and the issue is tied into politics, it's tied in to big business, it's tied into ethnicity, and it is tied into some other matters which I have to be cautious in talking about, but which are relevant and which I'll talk around as we go on. I want to first start by commending Joshua Seemungal, young journalist, and I was stunned when I saw that. I contacted him. I saw his resignation letter, and that ties into an age-old story. The current issue, we must see it in context. First, the current issue is that his line investigative editor had, and we could talk about it, it's in the public domain, I wrote about it, I called names and so on. She has ties to the PNM, a senior PNM official, and also, not only does she have ties. A lot of journalists have had political ties. Some have gone back into the newsroom and did not display any bias and so on. And some, like her, are accused of suppressing news. Now, she's very recent in terms of her involvement in the politics. She apparently, leading to the general election last year, she was in the employ, or she was doing work for the PNM and for that official of the PNM. And now she's come back, and rather than assimilate and do work fairly, she's allegedly, and we're going on what Joshua Seemungal has said, has tilted some stories, suppressed some stories, and so on. Now, if this was a standalone issue, it would have been bad enough. But it's more than that. But before I go back again to the historic thing, I want to discuss how The Guardian treated it. The Guardian carried a page one editorial that said fair and fearless, which was quite ridiculous. It was a sanctimonious position to take. And the facts don't line up with what The Guardian has said. I'll give you one example. The Guardian said in its editorial, in the page one editorial, that during the Rowley administration, they ran a page one editorial criticizing the Rowley government on crime. What the Guardian didn't say in that editorial is that Rowley's response to that editorial in 2019 was to warn the Guardian that they were a member of the Answer Macal group, which had an application for a bank license. And on hearing that, the Guardian ran cold on crime. They never carried another page one editorial, and they got very muted. And that is the issue of big business. That is the matter of big business owning media, right? And especially in the current context, the Guardian is not standing on its own. The Guardian lost $14.1 million in the first 6 months of this year, first 6 months. And the forecast is to lose 36 million by the end of the year. Anyway, I was telling the story about the Answer Macal Bank. The Guardian ran cold on the issue, and in 2022, the PNM government gave the license to operate the Answer Macal Bank. So you understand the backslapping that took place here. And the Guardian didn't indicate that. I want to go back a little bit. We have to understand the context of what the Guardian has done and its role in Trinidad and Tobago's history. All right, it has been a newspaper since 1917. It has always upheld the interests of big business, its owners, and so on. It is now a member of the country's largest conglomerate with 58 companies that make $700 million post-tax profit. And that organization, part of its success story is getting contracts for provision of goods and services to the government, where there is the provision of blocks. It is, by the way, it is a monopolist in several sectors. So it has lived good, let me put it this way, with the PNM administration and has gotten privileges, including the fact that, like I said, it's a monopoly in certain kinds of blocks, construction blocks, and so on. So the Guardian had played that role. In 1960, Dr. Williams famously burned a copy of the Guardian at Woodford Square, and he called the Guardian one of the 7 deadly sins in the country, because they saw him in all the worst ways. They saw him as a fascist and so on, because he was bringing nationalism to Trinidad and Tobago in 1960. Remember, in 62, he led us to independence and so on. And so the Guardian has always been safeguarding the interest of big business. In 1976, on the eve of the general election, when Mr. Pandey and the ULF emerged, the Guardian called them communists. And on the Sunday before the election, they ran a page one story. And they later recruited somebody to write what was called the Sunday Guardian Special Correspondent, which attacked workers' organization, workers' causes, and anti-PNM causes generally. The working masses stood against the working masses and so on. So that has been the Guardian's core role. A self-appointed role over the years. Now, you remember Mr. Pandey, while he was Prime Minister, spoke out against the Guardian repeatedly. And Mr. Pandey made several points, one of which is, listen, if you have taken a position to support a political party, you ought to say that, so we ought to know. And that happens in parts of the world. In the UK, for example, newspapers that so openly support the Conservatives or support Labour. But here, The Guardian has played the role of supporting big business and um, including and at times when certain big businesses are accused of doing certain illegal things, misrepresenting the story, not being fair and accurate and balanced. And I want to talk in general terms, really. And in the light of that, it gives fresh significance to what Joshua Seemungal said. He pinpointed one aspect, but it is not like he stood alone in what he did. He acted. I mean, I don't know whether he considered the history of all of this, whether or not he did. He is on the right side though of history because of the backdrop of what the Guardian's role in society. To sum that point up, to say that the Guardian has been the voice of big business. The Guardian has got along its business organization. Like I said, it's 58 companies who are driven by profit. They've gotten along well under the PNM administration. And that is a point that I could further develop, but the records indicate that they've gotten along extremely well. So for all those reasons, it is evident that the Guardians continue to play the role it has always played. Now, it is the fact that this journalist is being kept on in spite of overwhelming evidence that she is appearing not to be fair and balanced in the execution of her duties is probably an indication too that the Guardian has taken a position in this ongoing simmering PNM leadership row. Now, I mean, I could call names. The politician she's said to be close to is Stuart Young. Stuart Young has an alive interest in the leadership of the PNM. Stuart Young is generally supported by big business. He has the support of big business. You remember certain people coming out during the brief time when he was PNM leader and he was prime minister and endorsing him and so on. And they do that not because of any benevolence or anything like that. They do that not because of any charity or any such thing. It's because he is seen as representing big business. He's also seen by many as the most viable option for the PN to get back into office. And so there are certain big business people who are not in support, let me put it this way, of penny beggars. So that issue also aligns with the larger politics. So there are several things happening there all at one time, and we have to see the Joshua Seemungal issue in that context. It is very interesting that several people who are normally would speak for natural justice in the country and civil rights and so on have stayed mum in all of this. And it tells you that the saying the empire fights back. This changing the status quo is not easy in this country. Mr. Pandey found that out. Dr. Williams found that out, and so on. So this is about trying to change the status quo. And a lot of people have been co-opted. I wrote in my stories about people who take different positions. There was a short while I was sitting as acting chair of the state media, and when there were issues allegedly pertaining to worker journalism issues, there are people now who are the Guardian who led major protests and so on, who are now in the Guardian and who have run silent. We have to understand the issue as a larger issue than just Joshua Seemungal, but an issue about what Mr. Pandey used to call a long time the parasitic oligarchy, about big business. I think they have missed the boat in terms of understanding how this society has been transformed in recent times. And the result of the general election tells you that the balance of power has changed. And I think the Guardian is upholding an old order in the country. And a final aspect of this for now is to say while I said that a lot of organizations have not come forward and so on who represent that old order. I want to commend the Media Association. I know they may have had some internal strife and internal opposition from some members. But the leadership of Matt has come forward and asked for full disclosure and full explanation from The Guardian, which The Guardian has not provided. They put that whitewash page one editorial, which amounted to nothing. But the Media Association has to be commended. But the silence of others in the society tells us a whole lot. In all of this, Joshua Seemungal ought to be commended for his conscience position. Yeah.
My question is, what happens to Mr. Seemungal now? What is the next step for Mr. Seemungal? It's a pity I couldn't get him on this program. It would have been really nice to hear from him.
Yeah.
Maybe
Well,
hear.
I don't want to tell tales out of school, but I contacted him and
Mhm.
he sent me a note saying he's feeling liberated. You know, when you're a person of conscience, it bothers you to do things that fly against that. And there are still people in the media who are out of fair play and ethics and so on. I'm told by some of my journalistic colleagues at The Guardian that they're very uneasy. Some of them are very uneasy, but the job market is not very easy these days in the media. So some of them are holding on. But there are other journalists of conscience in the society. There are the people who want fair play and so on. And, you know, you can manage news, and that is what The Guardian has effectively done. And I see it all the time. I've been in newsrooms. I understand the dynamics of it. And I'll give you one example. The Guardian continues to talk about businesses closing down. To begin with, The Guardian didn't have these conscience pangs during the post-COVID period when thousands of small businesses closed, partly because of the policies of the Rowley government. The Rowley government did not give the kinds of support to small businesses that certain countries like England did. So the banks didn't support small businesses with support for payroll and for deferring loans and all these other gestures. In England, the Bank of England, which is really the central bank, did a lot of things, eased up on interest rates and so on. The short version of that is when COVID ended, thousands of small businesses closed in Trinidad, whereas some big businesses flourished. And I'll give you one example. Massey as a conglomerate went into all kinds of businesses that small businesses would go into. They were serving your lunch. They have a butcher shop. They have a furniture store. They have a flower store. They have a stationery store. All of those got footing when small businesses went out of business. The Massey Group has been known to be close to the Rowley administration. So all those things, and The Guardian had no conscience pangs over all of those things. The Guardian didn't write about those things. Now The Guardian is talking about small businesses closing as a result of the state of the economy. And I don't doubt that. I don't have the empirical evidence on every business. But I want to also say that there's a factor, I'm working on some key areas. I'll be cautious in what I'm saying. The crackdown on drug trafficking that took place late last year and continued this year, and money laundering has had an impact on some businesses. Some businesses, and I want to say I'm not suggesting all that shut down, and I'm not calling any names, I'm casting no direct aspersion, but some of them were shell companies for the purposes of laundering. Some of them, of course, is no longer viable to keep them open. The Guardian has not launched investigations into that. And frankly, the media generally, and I feel the commentators in society, I watch and I read, I listen and so on, and I don't see people framing the discussion like that. So the Guardian carries these series of stories, small businesses closing, which they see as an indication of the decline in economy and so on, but they don't put it in a larger context. And in respect to that, you have to understand what the Prime Minister has been doing. She has now, the U.S. Navy SEALs has come in to help with border security and so on, to deal with the drug issues. Remember, the Rowley government kept the borders open for all these years, 123 open borders, and those borders allowed us, we were a major transshipment point for drugs. And I want to be very cautious. I'm not calling any names and all of that, but that an evil cousin of drug trafficking is money laundering. And that has been a factor with some businesses. I just want to be very cautious in saying that. But I just want to say, I call no names, no make no direct aspersion. But just to say, the Prime Minister has been speaking to that issue. And I just want to note that the Attorney General, remember last week, he talked about revoking the visas of some big business people, some 1% people, and so on. And we have to understand that our leaders can't tell us everything, but there is an emerging picture that is happening. And that picture, with respect to this matter, is the issue of drugs, drug trafficking, money laundering, and so on. So I just want to be cautious. I'm not suggesting that everything the Guardian writes is about that, and so, but I want to say there's a larger context that the society not absorbing, and the Guardian is not reporting. In fact, I said this emphatically, the Guardian is not reporting on the issue of the government's attack on drug trafficking in this country has destabilized this country in a serious way. Look at the UK report that was revealed this month, is in the press today. It says how many gangs we have in this country, 186 gangs, and so on, and the porous borders and all of those things. The Guardian has not pushed that, and I just be cautious on what more I say on that matter. But I think I've framed that issue well enough to explain the Guardian's role, and it's a historic role that goes way back to Dr. Williams and what he did, Mr. Pandey, when he was Prime Minister, like I said, the ULF in 1976, and there's a whole scheme going forward.
Folks, I want to make one thing clear. I know viewers, listeners may be tuning into this program and probably think, okay, we have something against the Guardian. Let me say outright that we on this program don't have anything against the Guardian, the Express, the ACP, the whoever, right? I have the utmost respect for media and journalists, but we do expect fair and free journalism, right? Anybody could come on this program, they could say anything they want. I've said that already. We are not going to suppress any sort of opinions, freedom of expression, and so on this program. Right? Moving along, and Ken, I want to thank you for your very frank, open, honest discussion on this issue of Joshua Seemungal'S resignation. It is an important topic for Trinidad and Tobago, particularly with respect to how it impacts our democracy. We want to go on now. Before I go on, I want to acknowledge the presence of Senator the Honorable Brian Begg, who just joined us. Senator, thank you for tuning in. And we, of course, would love to hear what your take is on some of these things we are discussing tonight. Now, the next topic on the agenda is race politics, and I'm calling it race politics because that is what it is. It's race politics. Unfortunately, in Trinidad and Tobago, we have a tendency to practice race politics, and that is a certain nonsense that have to stop. But another issue that has generated a lot of public outrage is the comments made by Laventille West MP Kareem Marcel at a PNM political meeting in Laventille. I believe it was maybe a week ago, somewhere around July 10th, 11th, or something like this. And during his speech, MP Marcel accused the government of, and I'm quoting, hating African people, hating Black people, hating people from the PNM strongholds. I mean, this is what he said on the platform. He accused the government of hating, as I said, hating African people, hating Black people, hating people from PNM strongholds. And one of the most controversial moments came when he suggested the term PNM people, when we speak of PNM people on social media. That term PNM people had become the new N-word. I don't know what N-word he's talking about, but that's what he said, right? Now, these reckless comments, I mean, let's just call it what it is, reckless comments, out of place, out of time, and reckless comments sparked a lot of criticism from several quarters, well-deserved criticism, and including the National Joint Action Committee. The NJAC came out and they condemned these statements made by Marcel, right? And I mean, it goes without saying that these statements are indeed divisive, right? I mean, he may have been inflaming racial tensions, right? That is how, that was the risk there, the inflaming of racial tensions. So Ken, also, Senator Begg, if you would like to weigh in, do you believe that MP Marcel's comments crossed the line?
Oh, yes, absolutely crossed the line. It was very inflammatory. It was gaslighting. Trinidad is a very diverse country. Mr. Pandey and Mr. Manning used to say, managing the diversity is one of the biggest challenges in the country. And one has to be very cautious in their utterances. What he said was most unfortunate.
Additional beverage in those areas. Go ahead.
Yeah, most unfortunate. Equally unfortunate was that the statements were not condemned by Penny Beckles. Right? We must take note of that. She's the leader. Now, I want to bring into that discussion. I have it in front of me. Dr. Rowley posted on social media something that he said was said by Dr. Williams. I don't doubt Dr. Williams said it, but he attributes it to Dr. Williams. A post, he said, I call, and he's quoting Dr. Williams as saying, I call upon all party members to stop once and for all this infuriating nonsense that every Indian is anti-PNM. Every Indian is not anti-PNM, nor is every white. Some of the worst enemies of the PNM are as black as the ace of spades. Now, after that, I talked to some of my political sources to try to say, what do you think would have led to that? Now, all of this is in the realm of speculation, so I'm acknowledging it is speculation, but I think it's good speculation that Dr. Rowley would have issued that statement to reprimand or to distance himself from what MP Karim Marcel said. I think that was highly inflammatory, unfortunate, and it was reckless. Ought not to be uttered by any public official, and especially one elected by the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And I think it is an ongoing indictment against Penny Beckles as leader, one that will return to haunt her. I wonder how the East Indians and PNM feel about that. It is very unfortunate. And somebody said, and I think it's also a fair comment, and if a reverse statement was made, and let me call it out for what it is, by an East Indian and so on about PNM politics and so on, there would have been a national furor over it. I don't know that there was an editorial in the newspaper. There may have been. I missed it. But I didn't hear others coming forward. Now, I commend the National Joint Action Committee for that. We haven't heard from them for a long time. And we must acknowledge that NJAC has played a role in ethnic healing in this country. Their role in 1970, we must be remembered, Makandal Daga is no longer there, but we must remember that. And NJAC is a shell of its organization now, but it was nice of them to come out and make that statement. But that is very unfortunate, what Marcel said. And managing ethnic relations is an ongoing challenge. And all players in the politics must be conscious of that. They must be. Because it seems as though going back to ethnic and tribal roots, it seems to be a natural a defense, a natural mechanism for a lot of people. They feel they get injustice somewhere, they feel it's ethnicity. They feel they don't get a job here. They feel another person gets something, and so there is that fear. Mr. Pandey once said, Trinidad is a country where everybody feels they're second class, right? Everybody feels the society is against them. Everybody has that feeling. And we have to be cautious. Everybody in the public space has to be cautious. Whether you're a journalist writing, you're on the radio, you're in the parliament, wherever you are, we have to understand we're all in this together and we're building a society and we've done well post independence. Before that, of course, post these are immigrant societies, post slavery and post indentureship and so on. We've had our hiccups and so on. But I think generally we have done well, we get along so well, and so on. When these statements come, they set us back, and society must frown upon people who make those statements, from them to apologize and so on. And I didn't see that here, and that disturbed me a bit. And again, I'm saying it's an indictment against Penny Beckles as somebody who wants to lead Trinidad and Tobago.
All right. Well, I am seeing Senator Begg with his hand up. So, Senator, can you unmute, please, and go ahead?
Good night. Good night to Ken as
Good
Good
well.
evening.
Good night to everyone. I do share sentiments of Ken in that the comments made by MP Marcel, it is downright vile, it's downright disgusting. It was downright, I'm not even going to say unfortunate. It was downright not needed. Because where's the evidence that he had to prove of such statements that he made? And I agree with Ken in that how does persons who are of East Indian descent feel in the PNM? The question I will ask is this. If Deodat Oja Maharaj, who was the second general secretary of the PNM, Bisundat, Deodat, Errol Mahavir, if those persons were still in the PNM, would he have made such a comment? And these are founding members of the People's National Movement. If Kamaluddin Mohammed was there, would he have made such a comment? I mean, it says the thinking of the PNM. I know, and Ken could correct me. I know if Patrick Manning was the leader of the PNM, Kareem Marcel could not have even made that statement because Patrick Manning would have pulled him off that platform. And the fact that the leader of the PNM, who is now Penelope Beckles, when you asked her about it, she said, well, I didn't hear the comments, but you were there. How could you not hear the comments? And you were there. And for you to support this man, it is downright disgusting. And this is the way of the PNM. When the PNM cannot beat you on anything, they go back to race. They try race. And it shows again, the United National Congress is a party that governs for all. We have been bringing legislation. I am so proud and happy to be a part of this government led by Mrs. Pasabi Sessa as Prime Minister. We have brought legislation to fight for the people of this country. We just ensured that the Petrotrin workers through the OWTU are taken care of. I mean, who is that we're looking after? The people of Trinidad and Tobago. We have brought legislation to protect the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So, I mean, this is a young politician. And to go down that route, it is disgraceful. It is to a point where I have to watch him and think, well, what the hell is wrong with you? But then again, the apple don't fall far from the tree. In that if they know who his mother is, who is a former alderman of the Sawa Lavender Corporation, she acts the same way. But what I'm happy about is that he has got no traction with it. He has actually his comments has actually been rejected. I'm happy that I agree. I'm happy that Jack came out. And it shows that no one subscribes to such thinking anymore because Trinidad and Tobago is moving forward. And we are moving forward as a people with this government led by this Kamala Prasad as Prime Minister. So, I mean, that gentleman is living in a time zone that is so no longer recognized in Trinidad and Tobago. I don't know if Ken would agree with me there, but I would.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
No, Senator, I agree with everything you said. Everything, and you said it so eloquently. I just want to add, and I'm agreeing with you. That you mentioned Mr. Manning. For whatever Mr. Manning's weaknesses politically, he was committed, in my view, to ethnic unity. And I agree with your statement that sort of statement by Marcel would not have survived under Mr. Manning. I think Mr. Manning, and he had his many weaknesses and so on, but I think he was committed to unity of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I
And
always felt so.
I will close with this, that if this is what this gentleman says in opposition, God forbid if he's ever a government minister. And that is why we must ensure and reject the PNM in all forms and all fashion. So thank you.
Yeah, and I want to say he replaced Fitzgerald Hines, and when he emerged, we thought, well, I was going to say a bright young man. I won't say bright, but he was a young man who got into national office and so on, and he would represent a fresh thinking. And this is not just old thinking. This is absolutely not suited for a modern society, and especially one in which we are a diverse society. We must be cautious about our statements. We must be cautious, and especially when you're in elected office. But like I said, to me, the larger indictment is against the leader of the PNM, and that is somebody who will be putting herself forward for prime minister. If she survives, Stuart Young, by the way, who wants to challenge her. And I think he's doing everything to look to challenge her.
But you know,
But
Ken,
uh,
I will take you up further on this. This young man is a very young practicing attorney at law as well. And it makes me wonder. I am by far very senior than him. I am 15 years called to the bar. And that's a lot of years. And my seniors, they always trained me and told me, as an attorney at law, whether you are in the politics or you're not in the politics, you have to look at how you speak. Because your clientele also looks at you.
yeah, yeah.
And I
Your
mean,
public
it is
persona,
disgraceful.
it was disgraceful. Your public persona has to be above par, and you have to earn respect, especially, like I keep saying, this is a diverse country. There are different people of different ethnicities, different class, different interests, and you have to seek to represent the ideals of everyone. You can make your point, but your inflammatory language is not acceptable. But we see how it turns out, from that. But you're right. Fortunately, he didn't get support in the society. But equally, I'm not sure the dailies wrote editorials and so on against him. But hopefully the PNM will lift the game, and we'll see what happens in the leadership of the PNM, because I know, for example, that there is, you're in the Senate, there's this guy who acts as Senator Sanjeev Budu, that's his name?
Yes, yes.
Right. I'm told that Mrs. Beckles is having trouble because she was considering him and so on to move forward in the party and all that. And she was getting difficulty from some of her colleagues. Eventually, she put Miss Rose is her name.
Yes.
Right. But Sanjeev Budu acted as a senator, and he is, I think, a deputy leader, the PNM, and so on. But
Yes,
when
he
it was
is.
time to fill the position to replace Miss, what's the name of the lady?
John Bates.
Yeah, Janelle Bates. And Sanjeev Budu didn't get called up. Now, I don't know if that is tied into anything, but I'm just making that point. But I mean, the facts bear me out that he acted as a senator on several occasions, but was not appointed as a full-time senator
Well, Paul,
when the opportunity arose.
I will tell you this. Having listened to Miss Cedros, or wherever her name is, my God. Just here for my comments, your Lord will tell you.
For sure.
My God. It's yeah, that's why we sometimes we just say, Best your big bag John Bates, yes?
I think they're very
But
bad if it gets so.
guys, if I could weigh in on this here, right? Senator, I was surprised to hear something that you said there, where you indicated that the opposition leader said, she didn't really hear it, and things like that. If you look at the clip, when one of the initial clips that apparently you're not seeing anymore, when Mr. Marcel had made these comments, you would have seen the opposition leader and members of the PNM MPs cheering him on and laughing and clapping. So it's very confusing now to really hear someone say who was laughing and clapping. Well, we didn't really hear it properly. I think that is
Well,
being a little bit disingenuous.
well,
And
Donnie, I am glad you said it. You understand?
yeah,
But
yeah.
Well, see, what,
sorry, just let me make this one briefly. In addition to all of these things, Ms. Beckles is a very indecisive leader. She took so long to remove Janelle Bates from the Senate. That's something any leader would have done overnight. And all her decisions have taken forever. I'm not suggesting she should remove Balira Maharaj as the mayor of her area. I'm not saying so. But she keeps saying, I will act in due course and I will act. If she is taking a decision not to act and not to remove him, that's fair enough. But make that statement. She keeps appearing to be putting it off. Leaders can't afford to be indecisive. They've got
Well,
to do what they have to do.
by law, Ken, she can't really move Baliram Maraj, right? She must step down as mayor, right? She
Right.
can't really
Yeah.
remove it because he's an older man,
Mhm.
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
Further to that, right?
But she should make that statement. She hasn't said that.
She's not going to. And further to that, there was another player in the field, and yet he's still in the Senate,
yeah,
right?
yes,
Faris is still there,
yes, absolutely.
and that says a lot. But
Mhm.
it is what it is.
It's good for the goose is not good for the gander.
Yeah, indeed.
All
Indeed.
right, I see Curtis with his hand up as well. Mr. Brady, can you unmute, please? Curtis, we're not hearing you if you're speaking. All right, well, I guess for some reason we're not hearing Curtis, so let us move on. Ladies and gentlemen, just doing a quick time check. It is 8:52. If anybody has any questions on the item, or you have any comments you'd like to make, please feel free to raise your hand.
Lisha, I would like to make one more point on the
Okay.
issue of the comment where Mr. Marcel had made, they ain't like we, right? Even if he's just referring to UNC, though, like PNM, the historical context of the UNC in opposition disproves that statement, and I'm saying that and I'll give one example. Immediately when the UNC lost election in 2015, our current acting PM, Miss John, would have gone into one of the areas that she lost in and did an upliftment program to help the youths to come out of poverty, which was Project Hope. And that was done in La Hoqueta. La Hoqueta was one of the seats that she lost in. And that happened immediately after the UNC lost election in 2015. So his utterance of saying they and like we, it is fundamentally flawed because the history of the UNC, even in opposition, disproves that totally. Now my question is, what has he done as an MP? Has he done anything to uplift the people? Has he done anything sustainably to do that? These are the things you really have to look at and wonder.
Thank you, Donnie. Now I'm seeing Curtis is back with us, so I want to give him a chance to because he had his hand up for quite some time. Curtis, go ahead, unmute and make your comment.
Pleasant good afternoon. Are you all hearing me?
Loud and clear.
Yeah, sorry for that technical difficulties. I was having some technical difficulties. Pleasant good afternoon to each and everyone, to Lisha, to my good other co-host friend, and to the original, most esteemed Kenali, and to Senator the Honorable Mr. Brian Big, and to all of your listeners. Pleasant good afternoon to you. Ladies
Good
and
afternoon.
gentlemen, this diabolical tribe of divisive, nasty behavior of the PNM is something listened back from since 1956. Eric Eustace Williams. Now, a lot of your listeners might be young, and some of them might be at that point age, but there are some people who are kind of lazy in doing their history or trying to do some research. Eric Eustace Williams learned pretty well that a people who stands together is a dangerous people, and a people who is educated and informed is a dangerous people. Hence the reason why, from since the beginning of the diabolical tribe of this wicked, nasty, divisive PNM arrangement that came into Trinidad and Tobago's politics, had no right to be here ever.
Curtis, I see.
Downfall and the evolution of the destruction of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Listen, that remark that that young man made, as silly as it is, as specious and disgusting and disgraceful as it is, as distasteful as it is, that's the norm of the PNM. I could take you all back to the time when the PNM had this so-called disgraceful family day, when they had a man dressed up in a gorilla outfit, and he was portraying the deception of trying to rape a woman in an Indian yellow sari. And the Guardian media never carried that on their so-called disgusting editorial front pages, and totally denounced that type of behavior. Even the Section 34, which was good law. If you take a check in the Hansard, you will see that Keith Rowley, who led that march, he and his band of bandits, misfits, they totally they say yeah on behalf of all the sections, and Guardian media never ever made that claim, but what they did, they made other claims in order to destroy and oppress and bring down a government that is working for on behalf of the people. So it's something from since their beginning, that behavioral pattern. Don't be fooled. The PNM have no legs to stand on, and I am saying to the PNM, talk your talk, you mucking pretenders. That's what they are, a bunch of mucking pretenders. They are nasty, deceptive, wicked, stink, specious, wicked.
Okay, Curtis, listen, we don't.
And I am saying, you see, Penny Beckles is one of the most weakest leaders in the PNM, and that's a hooray for me, because the people of Trinidad and Tobago will see the United National Congress longevity going into the 30th century and beyond. The PNM has lost their footing, and there's no way ever that the PNM will never return to the halls of Parliament ever again. Wicked, stinking, dirty, and...
Thank you. Thank you.
Curtis, you're in a mood.
Right, you got a lot of thumbs up, people were agreeing with you and so on. So, I mean, but one of the things that both Ken and the senator said is that Marcel's comments, they got no traction, right? People rejected them, and that is because people in Trinidad and Tobago are fed up of all of the race talk.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Would show that it has gotten us nowhere. All it does, it takes the country backwards. People are fed up. Let me repeat myself all who was closing the fridge door and the car door and the whatever kind of door was there. People are fed up of the race talk. We need to move away from all of that nonsense. And the society is recognizing that. It's recognizing that. Nobody don't want to part of that again.
I
Right?
also feel, Alicia, that this current generation, and probably the one before, and certainly I would think the one and the generation coming forward, are more integrated together. We see more unity and more mixed relationships and so on. There was that insecurity, a lot of insecurity, a lot of skepticism, a lot of fear, a lot of hate, and so on, jealousy, and so on. Going forward, the leaders took advantage of that. I think Curtis was making that point, and Senator also. But I think moving forward, and you make the point very well, that that's not helping us as a society. There would always be racists among us. There always will be. But I think fewer and fewer. The voting patterns indicate that the way we live, the way we integrate, and so on. And as you said so well, it has not helped us. It has not helped us move forward. So people like Marcel represent a dying thinking. So here you have a new age guy, a relatively young fella, thinking like the PNM used to think many, many years ago. And the leader, saying it again, the leader has not come forward and distanced itself from that and said, listen, he was wrong and I'll have a word with him and so on and so on. And to say that everybody has a home in the PNM. So it's very unfortunate, but the bottom line of the point I'm making here is the society is moving past that kind of conduct.
Well, I mean, it goes even deeper. I mean, if we look at opposition politics, right? Now, Mr. Pandey, Mr. Pandey always indicated how cautious you must speak as well in the parliament or even outside of the parliament. Because at the end of the day, you are the opposition, you are the government in waiting. So that's why I said, imagine if this man is a minister. Because he said when the PNM reform government, that he's made a minister, he could deal with UNC people. So what is a UNC person from a PNM person? That is why I keep saying this is a God where everybody has been taken care of. We have been serving a nation. We have been serving a country. And I mean, I'm sorry that people like Ferdy Ferreira is not here anymore. Because I grew up knowing men like Ferdy Ferreira. I grew up knowing men like Bisuddat and Deodat Ojabaraj. I wouldn't say why. Errol Mahabir, right? Ferdy Ferreira, right? Ferdy would have called him out and say, what shit is you saying? I mean, you cannot make such statements. And then when they ask about it, he stands by it. Well, okay, pal. You stand by that vile statement? Well, you
Not
go ahead and
stand by it. His leader stood by it as well. The person who is the quote-unquote prime minister in waiting.
And that is why I say to the people of this country, we must reject the PNM. We must reject them with this dinosauric way of thinking. They are coming with this type of narrative to bring division in the country, whereas we are uniting our country. We are doing what we have to do to save our nation. We are doing what we have to do to save our nation financially. We are doing what we have to save our nation with the crime in this country. Right? I mean, Ken, you've been in journalism for years. I mean, we had men like Robin Montano. We had men like his brother. We had Kelvin Ramkey soon. You think that Kelvin Ramkey soon? Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm now missing his name right now. Right? Uncle Kello we used to call him. Right?
Mahabir,
Right?
No, Kelvin Ramnath, you mean?
Kelvin Ramnath. Right?
Ramnath. Right.
Kelvin Ramnath. I grew up calling him Uncle Kello. Right? When these men spoke, they knew what they would speak on. Right? But you come on a platform to say, well, you don't, we don't like we? Really? The East-West Corridor rejected the PNM. The East-West Corridor voted St. Joseph to the UNC. The East-West Corridor voted Tunapuna to the UNC. The East-West Corridor voted Toko Sangre Grande to the UNC. The East-West Corridor voted La Hocata Talparo, Sawa Barataria. Huh? And this is the nonsense they're going to bring. And you know what? They're going to try and bring it to the local election. Well, for the local election, they will have the biggest shock of their life when it comes. Anyway, I don't want to exit myself. I'm still recovering.
I just want to hear your, but I'm seeing quite a number of comments on social media. So, guys, thank you all for joining the program. I'm seeing Rudolph, Brian, Carrie, Peter, Mr. Peter Carnhigh has joined us. Peter, thank you so much. Zick, Darren, thank you guys so much for joining the program, and thanks for your comments and so on. All right, quick time check, 9:05, so we have about 25 minutes left. There is a third issue that we would like to discuss, and that's the Petrotrin workers' victory. And this may be one of these stories that is not getting the attention it rightly deserves. And this has to do with the granting of successive vesting rights to the Oilfield Workers Trade Union for former Petrotrin workers. For those of you who don't understand what that means, I'm sure that Mr. Ali will explain it far better than I will, right? Now, although as I said before, I mean, to me, it's such an important story, but it may not be getting the kind of traction that it deserves. However, for a few people, some people, including Mr. Ali, he has described it as one of the biggest labor victories in recent years. So, Ken, I will just turn the mic over to you now, and maybe you could tell us, just explain to the audience what this is about and why is it such a significant moment for the labor movement?
Right. Lisha, I'm glad that you put this on this evening's agenda. I'm particularly happy to speak about this. First, what it means is that the OWTU has the ongoing right to represent Petrotrin workers. The Petrotrin was shut down, was mothballed on November 30th, 2018. As a result of that, the registered trade union would have lost bargaining rights. There are certain conditions under which you get successor rights, one of which is that the successor company is essentially seen as carrying on the business of the previous company, and similar business, similar employees, and so on. But OWT did not have that. What emerged from this matter is that the effect of what the PNM government did was union busting. It's called union busting. Now, in my article, I went back to talk about 2003, when the Manning government shut down Caroni 1975 Limited. And the effect of that was essentially union busting. Now, again, in everything you must put context. Mr. Pandey had served as prime minister from 1995 to 2001. Mr. Manning, President Robinson had appointed him as prime minister, and he was trying to rebuild his political war chest. And he sought to weaken, undermine really, Mr. Pandey in his base area. So he summarily shut down Caroni, displaced well over 10,000 workers. All Trinidad Union was reduced since then, has been reduced to just representing a few workers here and there. That was effectively union busting. And All Trinidad was really the union of Mr. Pandey. Mr. Pandey had led All Trinidad since the 70s, since the 1970s. So that was the context in what that happened with All Trinidad. Now, All Trinidad and OWTO formed in 1937. The initial agitation, a lot of people don't understand the role of Faizabad in local production and oil in particular. In the 1940s, Faizabad produced, and it was years too, but the peak I think was in 1940s, a large percentage of the oil that was shipped to the Commonwealth country because of the on-land fields. in Faizabad. Those were before the offshore fields. So a lot of oil was exploited there. Faizabad is one of the oldest oil towns in the Commonwealth. So when we talk about that being the home of labor and the formation of trade unions, and that's the reason. It's not just any town. Faizabad is an old oil town. It doesn't have that economic activity, again, because there isn't that oil exploration there. Cuba Uriah Buzz Butler had come from Grenada and he was agitated. He was a wayside preacher, he was all of those things, and he was agitating for the workers. Alongside with him was Adrian Rienzi, then named Krishna Devanarayan, and who was more learned and so on. He later became a counselor and so on, and he went into public service and so on. So they agitated on behalf of the workers against the colonial class. The colonial people imprisoned Butler several times, including during the entire Second World War. They sent him on Carrera Island between 1939 and 1945. But he and Adrian Rienzi formed OWTU. They also formed All Trinidad. Now, I just give the context of All Trinidad being busted after 2003. Since then, All Trinidad hasn't had much of a sway in the labor movement. What the Rowley government did with respect to Petrotrin had a similar effect on OWTU. Like I said, a union formed in 1937. OWTU and All Trinidad formed in 1937. They were not the first unions formed. First unions were in 1932, but they were small unions. These were powerful unions. OWTU remained powerful through the years under George Weeks and so on. They fought for the nationalization of the oil industry and so on. They also fought for ethnic unity along with Mr. Pandey and All Trinidad. But the bottom line is what the PNM did and how it handled, first, the shutdown of Petrotrin, because the previous year Petrotrin made a profit, the shutdown of Petrotrin, and later what amounted to union busting of OWTU was a crushing blow against the trade union movement in this country. The successor rights that was given in the Vesting Bill that came up in the Parliament last week gives OWTU the right to continue to represent those workers. So it gives the workers that right of representation. It gives fresh life and relevance to OWTU, right? And it keeps alive an important trade union. OWTU is a very important trade union in this country. They have fought for social justice through the years and so on. There's one other aspect of this point I wish to make. I was saying the long history of the oil industry in this country. I have a lot of friends, some of them are old now, some have died and so on, in the oil belt, in the oil industry. And they have tremendous institutional knowledge. You know, it's like you have an old employee in your organization, whatever your organization is, and that person learn the ropes, learn everything. Yeah, that person gone and has not passed on that kind of institution. Institutional knowledge is important in every organization. You shut down Petrotrin, sent home almost 6,000 workers, plus downstream workers who were in allied industries. And for example, you had companies providing services like Schlumberger and some of these companies that were providing goods and services to the industry. All of that went. And the PNM government never made an effort to harness that talent, to say, let's document it, what these people, and so we've shut down Petrotrin. And that's a grave issue, you know. I still talk to some guys in the oil industry who serve in the oil industry and who are pained by what happened. And so all of this revives, I've spoken to my friends who they've all retired and so on now, but they feel a sense of hope that here, what we brought to the industry is appreciated. Somebody would record it. This is a complex industry, all right? It calls for petroleum engineers and chemical engineers and so on. It's a highly skilled, complex industry. And so all of this revives what those they brought. And of course, the government has plans to revive the refinery. So while these people may not be, most of them may not come back to work on the factory floor, they would have their work have been appreciated. They would have gotten the remuneration that they deserve, and they could help with the passing of the baton. So that is the context in which I was saying what took place in the parliament has enormous significance. It is important, it is instructive that it took place at the time of Labor Day. I think OWTO represented the point very well on Labor Day and other times, and they must be commended for that. But I don't think the media generally said that. They just said there's this vested bill and so on and so forth. But that's a significant thing. And the last aspect to say that it keeps alive the contribution of Butler and Rienzi. We must never forget what they did for the working masses. I think it's 89 years ago and going forward. Mr. Butler was imprisoned. He died in 1977, an old man, but he had made a tremendous contribution. Rienzi and his role, he formed both unions and he led both of them to start, but he later went into the sugar industry, and his contribution in the sugar industry is also remarkable. So I'm saying that the successor bill has enormous benefit to the workers, to the history of the organization, to the memory of these two great labor founders, and so on.
Yeah, and thank you very much for that. Ladies and gentlemen who are on the Zoom with us, and those of you all who are online, the time is now 9:15, so any questions, any comments, and so on that anybody has, we have just a few more minutes. Now would be the time to raise it, right? I am seeing a few here. Someone is asking, why is the name of Krishna the owner, right? Adrian Kola Rienzi ignored on Labor Day and our history. Ken, I don't know if you would.
Yeah, no, I am happy he asked that question. I write about that every so often. When I get upset over the issue, I write about it. Thank you, sir or madam, for asking that question. Let me illustrate that. I like to give anecdotes. Nothing must take away from what Butler did for the working masses. Nothing. They named the highway after him when you're coming down the Uriah or you're going up the Uriah Butler Highway. And that's good. Every time, every day we remember Butler. But you know what roadway is named after Rienzi? In San Fernando, there's a little piece of a roadway. A little piece, really. Call it a highway. It's not really a highway. The name Rienzi Curtin Highway or Curtin Rienzi. You know what's Curtin? Curtin was Gertrude Curtin. She was mayor of San Fernando and made no impact. Nobody ever remembered her or anything. And to put the PNM government named highway jointly, in other words, and that took place only after people protested. The role of Rienzi in labor history, and more than labor history, if I had time, I'd turn around and show you a book that Professor Brinsley Samaru wrote. I think it was his last book, which I bought and I studied and so on. And he made and Professor Samaru, God bless his soul, researched him thoroughly, went to England and went into the libraries and so on. And Rienzi made a very important contribution, not just to labor, but to San Fernando and to governance generally and so on. He's an important historic figure. So that person who asked the question, that is a most legitimate question. I don't know why history has not been kind to Mr. Rienzi as it is to Mr. Butler.
Can this be corrected?
I think so. I would like OWD to start the measure to begin with. I have not always felt that OWD has treated his memory well. And there are things we could do. There could be a lecture tour, there could be competitions, there could be stuff for school children and so on. And education, the university could take it up and so on. And I think, and for others too, there are others who have contributed to labor. I see during the Labor Day time, people talking about Elmer Francois, who fought for women's rights, and there are others. George Weeks' role in the nationalization of the petroleum industry must never be understated. And of course, Mr. Pandey and several others fought for the workers and workers' rights in this country. And we must always remember, too, that the PNM was oppressive against workers. They brought out in 1973 the Industrial Relations Act to stop protests and so on and so forth and so on. So worker leaders came up against a lot of oppression. The 1975 march for peace, bread, and justice. The PNM government under Dr. Williams sent police officers, young recruits with baton to beat, which they did, beat Pandey and Weeks and Clive Nunes and all of them.
That was Bloody
So,
Tuesday, Ken?
yeah, Bloody Tuesday. Yeah, Bloody Tuesday. Bloody Tuesday.
Yeah.
We must never forget. That is part of our history. We must never forget those things. I don't forget it. So we must acknowledge the role of our labor heroes. They help make Trinidad and Tobago a better place. They and their representation for workers against a lot of oppression. All workers working in the cocoa fields, in the cane fields, in the oil industry were extremely exploited. What Mr. Pandey did for sugar workers, it's historic. He got 100% wage increase for them. He got women rights in the field. Women had to work like men in the field, and he got housing for them, and among many other things. Many other things. So we must remember our labor heroes, and I think Mr. Rienzi deserves as much accolade as Mr. Butler.
Okay, Ken, thank you so much for that. We just have a few moments left, right? Now, before we go to you for closing remarks, I just want to take a look at some of the comments we have on social media. Somebody is speaking about starting back up dry docking, shipping repairs. I know, like on the comments, people may point out certain things that they would like to see that may not have anything to do with what we are discussing.
No, but that's also a good point. We talk about diversification. Mr. Manning had spoken about using the maritime industry for diversification. And I don't know the details of what this person speak about, but I think we must explore as many opportunities for economic diversification.
Absolutely. So thank you for that comment. Somebody brought up the stepdaughter of the politician who,
Right.
that's something that keeps coming up again in the public space. People want to know where is the accountability, what is going to come out of that, and so on. Right? Penny ran down the clock until Parliament closed, so Faris and John Bates wouldn't face the parliamentary privileges.
Good observation. And we forget to talk about Faris Al Rawi, but that's true. Faris has a special place in the politics. Nobody wants to touch him, and is it because what he brings in terms of big business links and so on? But again, the commentator is correct.
Most importantly, the medical plan for employees and retirees will be reinstated.
Yes.
The Petrotrin.
Yes.
Yes, good.
Indeed.
Time to bring
Yes.
back sugar industries and rice, and also what about growing wheat in Trinidad? We will hold that for when Donnie does the agriculture.
Yeah, well, Donnie's the expert. Donnie's the expert there.
Right. All right. 9:22. I am seeing Trini with his hand up. Right. We probably have time for one more comment, and then we'll go to closing remarks from Ken. So Trini, go ahead, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Very interesting discussion. I tried to get on earlier, but I had some internet issues because of the lightning and thunder that we have in the area. I would like to tie up all three topics. Curtis, I heard Curtis started talking earlier about where this division and racism started. The PNMS, the modus operandi of Dr. Williams, ever since 1956, has always been divide and rule. In 1956, there was the WFP and the PNM. The WFP was the Workers and Farmers Party with Mr. Capaldeo and so on, up to 1966. And the PNM's modus operandi was to have division within the workers, the oil field workers and the sugar workers, the farmers, because that is what the Workers and Farmers Party was about. You spoke about Mr. Butler coming in from Grenada and getting involved in the oil field. That was also a ploy of the PNM, bringing in Caribbean workers, which would be predominantly Afro workers, to work in the oil field. so that the oil field, Point Fortin, you were talking about Point Fortin and Faizabad and Palo Seco and so on, was populated with oil field workers so that they would control the oil field and they would have control of that voting bank in the oil field. And that is how Dr. Eric Williams controlled Trinidad and Tobago for 30 consecutive years. And the concept of racism was planted in these immigrants who came from islands where there weren't any Indians. It was predominantly Afro-based immigrants coming into Trinidad. And that is what, just like there's animosity between the Venezuelan immigrants and the Trinidadian citizens now, there was that animosity that existed just because you're an immigrant. That's where the name Bajan come from Bajan. And that animosity stayed and was encouraged by the PNM, so that it helped the PNM to always rule by dividing Africans and Indians throughout that whole 30 years from 1956 to 1986. Now, in 1976, Dr. Eric Williams realized, well, in 1970, let's go to 1970, when the Africans, the NJAC, woke up and realized, but listen, how are we benefiting from the voting PNM? We are not. Because if you look at what was happening economically, the Western Peninsula and the so-called ones, the self-proclaimed 1%, they were benefiting. The Africans were suffering, the Indians were suffering, and everybody else was making progress. And money was passing through the country like a dose of salt. And in 1970, the Africans and the Indians united when the NJAC and Mr. Pandey and so on, the marches, the Black Power marches. Eric Williams exiled Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, from Trinidad and Tobago. He exiled him in 1970. And no PNM prime minister, none, lifted that exile. Mr. Pandey advocated, when the NAR took government, he advocated for Mr. Robinson to lift the ban from Mr. Kwame Ture. He didn't. Mr. Manning didn't. In 1996, Mr. Pandey, when he became prime minister, he lifted the ban of Stokely Carmichael or Kwame Ture. And he started that whole center that they have in Port of Spain, the Kwame Ture Center for African Studies that Mr. David Abdullah controls right now. Mohammed controls right now. That was initiated with Mr. Bastille Pandey, the first Indian prime minister, did that for the African people. So this foolishness of division that this Karim and all the other, that's something that is planted. It's deeply rooted in the PNM, in the psyche of the PNM, and in these African communities. If you talk to people like Stark or Jason, same Jason X, and if you talk to people like Irvin and even the people who are against the UNC, like Mr. Workers' Rights, they have grown up in an environment where they were taught to believe that their demise is because of Indians. They were taught that from as little children. That is why Juliet Davies is the way she is. When she spoke and she said, I know Indians with oil, coconut oil in their hair, walking around barefooted with sari and sapat. When she was a little girl, it is a fact. But why did Indians progress and Africans didn't? Was it because of the Indians? It was because of the PNM. The PNM never developed Laventille. How has Laventille changed since 1956 till now? people still using latrines in Laventille. How have they developed? How have they benefited from the wealth of this country? If you talk, Irwin talks about it
All right,
every time.
sorry to cut you across here, but it is 9:29 and we wanted to wrap up by 9:30. So if you could just maybe finish off in about 30 seconds or so, and then we'll go to Ken for closing remarks.
Well, basically, what I'm saying is that attitude that Mr. Karim has, Mr. Fitzgerald had it when he spoke about alligators, and the guy from Tobago when he spoke about the Calcutta ship, and it's been said by many of them along the way, the recalcitrant minority. Eric Williams and the PNM, the modus operandi of the PNM is to divide and rule. They divided workers, oil and sugar. They divided religion, Muslim and Hindus, Christian and Hindus. That's what it was all about, the divide and rule. And the media comes into play. If you remember, during the first 30 years, Ken, we only had the Express and the Guardian. The bomb used to be always chastised and prohibited and so on. There were no other newspapers. It's the same thing with it's only in 1986 when the NR took over, we had TV stations and radio stations, proliferation of TV and radio. Before that, it was just 610 and Guardian and Radio Garden. It was just 2 radio stations, 1 TV station, and that was it. All that changed when the first time in 1986 with the NAR, and it was expanded further in 1996. But there was always prohibition by the PNM, control of the people, control of the media, dividing the people to rule. That is what it's all about.
All right, Trini, thank you. So Ken, over to you now and your responses to Trini and your closing remarks.
Yeah, a lot of what Trini says there ties into the point that there's a new order, and which is a point I was making at the start of the conversation. And the society is changing. And when we have these old institutions that are not prepared to modernize, including the media, including the PNM and so on. But this, they're saying the people are ahead of the leaders. And this is a good example of the point I'm making is the society, the old status quo is dying, but they're not acknowledging that. That's why the Guardian is losing as much money as it is. It's becoming irrelevant, but it's remaining a loss leader to uphold certain business interests. I just want to, one point that Trini made there, which I neglected to say when we were talking about labor. One of the things that Dr. Williams said is that one of his achievements, he listed as one of his achievements, that he kept oil and sugar workers apart, which was a subtle way of saying, a not so subtle way of saying, keeping Africans and Indians apart. And because he always knew that if there was ethnic unity, the PNM was going to be in trouble. Right? He was fully conscious of that. So I talked about, before the IRA, which I talked about 1973, before that, there was something called the ISA, Industrial Stabilization Act, and the trade unions of that era used to call the ISA is slavery again. And that was very oppressive against joining trade unions. And also, if you represent workers in one so-called essential service, you couldn't represent others in another. All of that is ready to keep workers apart. So all of that is part of what took place. And just one other point from what Trini talked about, the number of immigrants. A number of them really came and stayed in the southern communities of Point Forte and Labre and Erin and so on. And when they got comfortable, because there were no immigration officers and so on, they eventually moved to Laventille and Morva, where before containerized cargo came in, there was 2 companies running the port. One was Port Authority and one was Port Contractors, and they literally employed thousands and thousands of workers there. They became a voter bank for the PNM and remains their children, their offspring, and so on, at Laventille and Morva and all of those areas. And they were employed in masses by the on the port, when the containerized cargo came, they didn't need those kinds of workers, and they start farming them off into various places. Telco, which is the forerunner to TSTT, had a lot of those workers. The union that represents them, CWU, their president, served as a PNM government senator, and so on. And they also put a lot of them into the Water and Sewerage Authority, which was formed in the 1960s. But anyway, all of that is maybe for another discussion. I thank you, Alicia, for having me. There's much more we could talk about. There must be eternal vigilance for us to keep the democracy alive, to inform our people, because the established legacy media is not doing sufficient of that, sufficient about that. And in the process, we must also herald those who are standing up. I want to go back to Joshua Seemungal. I want to go back to the Media Association, and I want to thank you for the continued good work you're doing. You're working very hard, and I admire what you're doing. And Donnie, your good work also in agriculture and other fields. So thank you very much for having me. I want to end on a light note to encourage people to watch the football. The football is very high quality. Whichever team you support, the football comes once every 4 years. Have a little fun and enjoy the football. Thank you for having me, Alicia.
Argentina all the way. Argentina all the
Ready?
way.
Messi, listen, Messi is a genius. Well, the other geniuses at play, but Messi, close to 39 years old now, a genius. But Ronaldo is too, pathway of France, and several others. So, Brian, I don't know if you're enjoying it, but
We're
and
studying
everybody.
them. Argentina all the way. Of course. Yes, yes, yes. You didn't see the papers out.
We wish them well. We wish them well.
Yes.
Yeah. Alicia?
Hey, Tony, any final comments from you?
Right. So I think tonight's discussion was very in-depth, and a lot of historical context came out in all topics, especially in labor, right? Now, as we on that, and we're talking about things and people we shouldn't forget, I'll just have to make a plug. I support we should not forget the contributions of Adrian Colarienzi. And as we also celebrate, not celebrate, but remember Bloody Tuesday, in kind, we should not forget the Jahaji massacre, right?
Yes,
The
yes.
Jahaji massacre is almost forgotten, right? It is almost forgotten from our history, from our current teachings, and we should never allow these things to happen.
You know, Donnie,
there's so much.
As you said that, Alicia could consider bringing a historian, I don't know if Mr. Tilak Singh or someone, to give a lecture on that on one of our shows. I agree with you.
That is why I raised that topic, because I think we need to look at these things.
Yes, yeah. If I could suggest a name, I will do that. And I agree with you on that. There should be a I see there are new people all the time who are not aware of these things. And those like me need to get a refresher on it. That was an important development by the indentured servants, laborers, and so on, coming forward, securing their rights and so on. We have,
and they were murdered.
Yes, yeah, indeed. And it's important to keep that discussion going on indentureship and slavery and our past, whatever aspect of our past.
Yeah.
It's important to do that. Yes.
And when it comes to indentureship, there is so much that the current history books doesn't teach. Most people have no idea who Gaj Singh is, right? And he was the first, as they put it in India, overseer of Indians during the indentureship period, who in essence was like our first ambassador from India to Trinidad, who was sent here by the government of India during our Republican phase, right? To ensure that the rights of the indentured laborers would not be trampled on, right? Many people don't know about him. And he is actually now the Maharaja of Udaipur, and he's still alive today.
Okay.
Right? I actually visited his palace. I had long, in-depth discussions with his palace historian who gave me quite a bit of historical context into Trinidad and that period. But the name Gaj Singh is not known. So our true history seems to be forgotten. And when we really look at the historical context, it comes at a piece rate. And we need to change that. We need to change that conversation.
Indeed.
But all in all, wonderful conversations. I think it's the beginning of something nice. And I look forward to pushing this conversation a little bit further.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I will close by saying, yes, indeed, I think this was one of our most excellent conversations we've had. And we discussed 3 issues. In fact, we discussed more than the 3 issues we set out to discuss. But we discussed 3 of the main issues that have captured the national conversation, which would be Joshua Seemungal'S resignation, the race politics, and the Petrotrin workers' victory. I agree with both of you all. We got a lot of history here tonight. In fact, at times I felt like I was in a history class. That's okay, because we need to understand the past to understand the present.
Correct. Yeah.
When we talk about the past, I have to agree with what Ken would have said, that the old status quo is dying and there is a new order indeed, right? And we as a country, we have to be willing to adapt, to embrace change, to move forward. We cannot remain stuck in the past, right? So those are the comments that I would like to leave you all with. I want to sincerely thank from the bottom of our hearts Mr. Kenali for coming on this program, sharing his insights, his knowledge. He is just so knowledgeable. Also, Senator Brian Begg, again, for coming on the platform, sharing his opinions, his knowledge, and so on. It's always great to have him. We had our political commentators, Trinity to the bone, Mr. Brady. I don't know if Mr. Brady's still here, but thank you guys so much. All of the viewers who came on Zoom, on social media. I know we did have one media house with us as well. Thank you for your interest in the program, your questions, your comments. And please do join us again next week, Tuesday at 8 p.m. for another episode of One on One. Stay safe. Thank you. And good night, everyone.
It's going to be a restful night. It's rainy already.
Okay. Good night, everyone.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.